Good evening and hello to everyone, and thank you for coming tonight to spend an evening with us. I think we have a fabulous program ahead and it should be an interesting conversation. Today's transit talk is 10 years of light rail, 10 years of connecting community. We'll celebrate a decade of Link Light Rail, explore what we did, what we could do better, and how we can better center communities in the process as light rail continues to expand. We're joined by a great panel of experts and leaders from a variety of organizations, all with very unique perspectives on today's topic. I'm very honored to be moderating tonight. This is a fantastic group of dedicated and effective leaders in our community. They have all worked tirelessly to get things done. Before we begin our discussion tonight, I will briefly introduce each of our speakers. Their full bio is in your handout. After I introduce them, we'll do a round robin of what's your favorite stop off a light rail station, and then I will ask an initial question of the panelists. Each panelist will have 3 minutes for a response. After everyone's 3-minute response has been presented, we'll have a few minutes for panelists to respond to each other. The audience will then have time to ask the panelists questions. Please remember to write them on the cards handed out to you. So let's begin. Our first speaker tonight is Don Billen. Don is Executive Director for Planning, Environmental Review, and Project Development at Sound Transit. Don started at Sound Transit in September of 1996 as a graduate school intern shortly before the Sound Move vote. Don has since had the opportunity to be part of the dedicated and talented team planning, building, and operating our growing regional system. Our second speaker will be Estela Ortega, who is the Executive Director of Centro de la Raza, a leading civic rights, human services, educational, cultural, and economic development organization here in Seattle. She has actively engaged in coalition building, political advocacy, and strategic development while working at El Centro. Estela is also responsible for the development of Plaza Roberto Maestas, the community building we're in, mixed-use, community-inspired, transit-oriented, affordable housing project adjacent to El Centro de la Raza. Greg Nichols, in a lifetime of public service, served as the 51st mayor of Seattle, president of the United States Conference of Mayors, and King County Council member. While mayor, Greg led the effort to build light rail in Seattle and worked with regional leaders to tackle long-standing transportation problems. Greg is best known for his leadership on climate protection and urban sustainability. Jill Mangaliman is a queer Filipino-American community organizer, born and raised in Seattle. For 6 years, they organized in local and national campaigns involving healthcare equity, immigrant rights, and protecting social services. In 2009, they joined Got Green as part of the city weatherization program. Here they stepped into leadership from founding board member to lead organizer. After a 2-year leadership transition, Jill stepped in as executive director for Got Green in 2014. Luis Rodriguez is a South Seattle staple. As the owner of the station, a much-loved Beacon Hill coffee house that serves as community hub, artist collective, political activism engine, and neighborhood gathering place. Luis has become known for his political advocacy and unapologetically POC-centered views. Luis wants the station to be a safe place for people of color, for the LGBTQ community, and for people experiencing homelessness. Opened in 2010, the station welcomes people of all backgrounds. Mark Hallenback is the director of the Washington State Transportation Center, known as TRAC, at the University of Washington. Mark has been with TRAC for over 32 years. Much of Mark's research involves the collection, use, and reporting of data that describe transportation system use and performance, and then using that information to work with the public and decision makers as they make major transportation and land use investment decisions. Miranda Redinger is a senior planner for the city of Shoreline. She joined the city of Shoreline in 2007 and is currently specializing in long-range strategic plans. From 2013 to 2016, she managed sub-area planning for 2 light rail stations coming to Shoreline in 2024. As co-chair of the city's green team, she also worked on the environmental sustainability strategy, the climate action plan, and the Deep Green Incentive Program. Wow, what an incredibly impressive group. So thank you all for being here. So we're going to get started with our very first question tonight. This will be a quick round robin. And for the audience, panel members, would you please restate your name, share your gender pronouns, and your favorite spot off a light rail station? And for instance, my name's Barbara Wright. My gender pronoun is she, her, and my favorite spot off light rail is the triple door.
I'm Don Billen, he, him, and my favorite stop off the light rail is Elliott Bay Books on Capitol Hill.
Estela Ortega, she, her, and my favorite spot is Plaza Roberto Maestas.
Greg Nichols, he, him, and we. I have to say that my favorite stop is whatever the newest stop is. I had a chance to be involved in the first and second Sound Transit ballot issues that passed, and I just love it when the newest one opens up and people are looking at it and realizing that their life has just changed, at least their life in transportation.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. My name is Jill Mangaliman. I use they, them, their pronouns, or just my name, Jill. And my favorite stop off the light rail is the Station Cafe, actually.
Hi, everybody. My name is Luis Rodriguez. I'm the owner of the Station Coffee Shop, and my pronouns is he, him. It's an inner joke I was going to say, but my favorite stop is definitely the Station Coffee Shop in Beacon Hill.
My name's Mark Hallenback. I'm going to have to go to the Station Coffee Shop just so I can find out all these cool things about it. So my pronouns would be he, him. If I have to pick anything, it would be any French bakery you can get to. Yeah, and there are lots of them.
Miranda Redinger, she, her. My favorite stop is actually, I live near the Northgate station, slated to open in 2021, so I am just enjoying watching the construction and it come out of the ground.
Back here. Yep. Thank you, everyone. Our second question will give our speakers a chance to reflect on the first phase of light rail. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to answer the question, and I'm asking each speaker to respect the 3-minute time limit so others on the panel and in the audience have a chance to talk tonight. TCC staff will be holding up a time card for the panelists to help you use your 3 minutes. So there'll be a, there we go, over here, Regina. She'll give you the warning when you've got 1 minute left. You'll have another chance to respond later, so if there's something you didn't get to say, you wanted to say, we'll have some time for that. And after all the panelists have spoken, each panelist will have 1 minute to comment on what they heard from other panelists or add those thoughts you might have forgotten before. We will have time for a few audience questions. If anyone in the audience has a question, we've placed 3x5 note cards around the room. Please write down your question on the card, hold your card in the air, and a staff member will pick them up. So now we're ready to really get in the meat of things, and we're going to start for our second question, and I'm going to ask Don to start us off, and we'll go down the row. What have we learned in these last 10 years of light rail? How can we apply the lessons learned in this phase to make it even more successful?
All right, thank you, Barbara. Well, I feel like I can't start a talk about Sound Transit lessons learned without going back to the early days of the agency and the very painful lesson that we had to learn about getting the fundamentals of infrastructure delivery right. Those of you that have been in the region for a while may remember that we almost lost the agency and the opportunity to deliver high-capacity transit for another generation because the early agency simply wasn't mature enough yet in its planning, communication, engineering, and construction systems to really be able to effectively deliver a major capital project. And it took board intervention and new agency leadership to right that ship. We're now in the midst of a very rapid expansion and having to scale up again as our operations expand and as we embark on delivering one of the largest transit expansion capital programs in the nation. Another really important lesson learned has been in the area of community engagement. Nothing slows a project down more than being in a protracted battle with the community or a jurisdiction about a project. And we're working hard on being an agency that moves from just seeking community input on plans that we've already developed to really trying to engage with communities on the development of those plans. And this is really even more important as the region faces an affordable housing crisis. And we see that the success of light rail means that our station areas are attractive places for people to live and work. And that creates economic pressures that can accelerate displacement. So a couple things that we're trying to do in those areas. On the engagement front, we've really put in place a much more structured approach to engagement that involves community workshops, stakeholder advisory groups, elected leadership groups, early partnering agreements, much more intentional early look at land use planning, and we're being more intentional about our property acquisition process. We also have some new tools available to us to help in those areas. The state legislature a few years ago gave us the authority to discount surplus property in order to facilitate affordable housing, and we've been using those tools on Roosevelt, First Hill, Capitol Hill, and are looking forward to future opportunities to do more of that. Over the next year, we're going to be standing up a revolving loan fund that's going to give us another tool in our toolkit to address these very challenging issues. So that's 20 years and 3 minutes, and I think my time is up.
Thank you. Well, when I think about lessons learned and some of the challenges that we in particular in the south end of Seattle faced, is I think about how far the stops are from each other. I think we were looking at probably that they were about a mile apart. And then when those stops were planned and implemented, there weren't sidewalks that were created so that people could walk easily. And, you know, we have been involved in some conversations over the last probably year with Sound Transit in terms of getting our input into, you know, this is what we're doing and this is how we're planning it. And I have to tell you that I was disappointed to hear that we're looking still at above ground light rail in communities, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but I remember raising the question, why are you again putting above ground light rail in communities of color? It's going to be difficult for development. So I want to go on record saying that, because I see what Martin Luther King looks like and I see what Beacon Hill looks like, and there is a marked difference in terms of the development. Another point that I want to make, and I'm not sure how we remedy this, but again, in off of Martin Luther King Way, a lot of people got pushed out because the prices of houses went up. On Beacon Hill, as an example, in 2016, we saw something like a 46% increase in the cost of housing. So how do we mitigate that when, you know, we're trying to, you know, address transportation, but we don't want to push people out of their homes at the same time. And I think that when we develop light rail, we think that's going to get everybody out of their car. And we in Seattle know that we need family housing, so we're building 3 and 4 bedroom apartments or units, if you will. That means that you have a large family, and realistically, they need a car. And so we need to be thinking about when we say we don't need any parking around light rail. So those are my initial thoughts. Thank you.
So Don mentioned that he goes back a little further than 10 years with Sound Transit, and I do too. I began working on the idea of creating a mass transit system for the Seattle metropolitan area in 1988. I co-sponsored an advisory ballot for King County that asked the question of voters, do you want us to start planning for and funding a light rail system? And we thought we would be under construction by about 1995. Stations open in about 2000, so we'd be talking about 20 years instead of 10. But it got done. And as Don mentioned, one of the big hurdles was going from a planning agency, which in 1996 had 22 employees, to an agency able to build a multi-billion-dollar light rail system in an already urbanized area, a very difficult task. Well, we've created an agency, it's now 25 years old, that has not only gone through a very difficult adolescence, but I think has matured into one of the best transit capital project managers anywhere in the country, and it's managing now the largest portfolio. We learned, for instance, that mass transit is something that is particularly important to younger voters because they believe they will actually live long enough to use it. And so presidential elections are better than March special elections. We learned that by losing in a March special election in 1995, and we came back in the presidential election and won pretty easily. We made some mistakes in the early days about how we went about dealing with concerns that were raised in the community. We put some of the line in the wrong place. I'll give you an example where we're along the freeway going out toward the airport. We should have been on 99 where we could serve human beings. And the problem was that there was zero support for that, political support anywhere. I believe that we, with Sound Transit 2 and now Sound Transit 3, will in fact catch up. We will have a system at the end of Sound Transit 2 that will have a capacity to carry 1 million people a day. And that means that more and more people will get to make the choice where they live and work and recreate in a way that uses transit as opposed to the single occupant car. And that's a huge transformational change. So I'm proud to have been a part of it. I'm very excited about watching what's taking place now and very much looking forward to the future and a very bright one for mass transit in our area.
Hi, everyone. Okay, this works. Hi. Okay, so environmental justice organization. So that means we pay attention to where people eat, work, and play and live. And so transit, actually the Sound Transit 10 years ago, our base is transit dependent. And so a lot of our members and our base, especially in the South End, are dependent on public transit and don't actually have cars. Half of them don't actually have cars. But so the idea about Sound Transit was actually really welcomed, and that also the potential of creating jobs. However, what we soon learned was that the planning and the process also didn't really include us, and we had to fight for those jobs. And so pushing for local hire ordinance, target local hire, to actually ensure that people who are facing higher rates of employment, folks from at-risk communities, can actually have a job on the work site. That was something the community had to push for. And then also we realized that when the transit, they skipped over Graham Street Station, which was a very important part of the community. And so also, again, through our coalitions, Puget Sound Stage South Core had to fight for our stop back. And then we realized they were taking away some of our buses as well, and it's actually like a full mile between Othello and Columbia City, and so for seniors, for youth, for people with different abilities, to have to not have the bus access between stops was not correct, and so the community had to voice their concerns and fight to get their buses back. And then as of late, we've been realizing more and more how the land around the Sound Transit line became a developer's paradise where it's all market rate housing. And so really, how is it that this transit system is not for class people, and we are seeing more and more of our communities pushed out of the city because they can't afford, and then having to rely on driving to work or school or to be with their community. And so the whole idea of that Sound Transit had to not sell their surplus land at market rate was also a community fight to ensure that surplus land was actually made to go to the Office of Housing or be put up for sale not for a market rate. So it had to be lower than, there's no reason to make profits along the light rail, this is where people need to live and where need to access their. Lastly, I just want to share, we're hopeful because we're no longer in Columbia City where we can't afford to be there anymore. Our people are no longer there. We've actually moved to South Beacon and are near Graham Street, and we're really taking in those lessons. How are we going to ensure our community is represented, is our voices are considered before they break ground? I agree with Estela that above ground light rail is dangerous for our people. There's so many accidents that happen off Othello and Columbia City, some horrific car accidents. Why is it that there are no protective arms, or how is it that the train is allowed to go through our communities like that without in concern of people's safety? Whereas in Soto they have protective arms, or in downtown and here they're underground and not affecting the youth or the people who are trying to cross the street. And I'll just end with we want to accept more public transit. That's, again, part of our community's need to get around, but we also want it to be ensured that it's for us as well. Thanks.
So for me, I have to echo a lot of what Jill say and also Estela. For me, my perspective is very different because I'm a business owner in this neighborhood, and I'm also a member of this neighborhood. So for me, it's one of those things as a member of this neighborhood, I've seen many of my ex-neighbors and community people been pushed out of this community. So that for me is very sad that a lot of the companies and restaurants, local restaurants that we have been, they're gone. One of those staple was South China, that was just where the light rail station is right now. So that restaurant was there for 30 plus years, maybe more, I believe, since the 60s, way before I was even in America. So so for me, that's pretty sad. Also, as a business owner, I am very, quote unquote, thankful that the light rail has been helping my business, my small business, to be better. But I believe that's more my community than the light rail station. What I think that we have learned from these 10 years, for me, my perspective is that I wish the Link Light Rail Station wasn't so militarized with cops. I believe that we don't need so many cops in there. We don't need securities. We don't need, for me as an immigrant, that I've done everything in my power to love this country. It's a slap in the face for me to know that there's ICE and that we allowed ICE in there. Those are two different places. One is federal. The other one is our community train station or whatever. So I don't see why ICE is why we're making it so easy for militarization of for our people. Another thing for me, and unfortunately for the light rail, is that I get to see, because my windows are right in front of the light rail station, so I get to see who are the people they're taking out of the train stations. And unfortunately for you guys, I get to see all my black kids and all my brown kids being pushed out. And I believe that we need to not do that. We need to, instead of, I have a 15-year-old kid and he's black and Mexican. So for me, if I'm waiting for my kid at 8 o'clock at night, I'm expecting my kid to come home. Kids forget things. They drop IDs, they drop everything. They change their clothes, their friends. So many things can happen. So if he doesn't have money and he forgot his ID or his card, and they get pulled over, or are they going to take out my 15-year-old kid or my 12-year-old kid? I don't think that's right. I think the kids should be free. I think that we should be better with our youth. And I've seen a lot of that, unfortunately, for my black and brown kids. I don't think that's happening too much with other people. I don't think that we're supposed to be there as I don't know what it is, police. People come to the station as a coffee shop, and I don't have to like look for people with, that they're problematic or anything. So I'm pretty sure that nobody goes to the light rail station to do anything bad. There's no such thing as bad people. So I think that we can do better for the next 10 years. In the next 10 years, I think that we need to be better as human beings. We are in a place right now with our president showing all these anger and all these things, and I see it in a liberal city that we live. We're doing the same thing. So hopefully we can do better than that.
The problem being at the end of the table is I have nothing terribly original to say that hasn't already been said. But I have a reputation for talking, so I'll say something. I don't know. To me, the biggest lesson we've learned is how hard it is to actually work together. If you look at what we've done least well in our construction of Sound Transit to date, is the station access, on how you get to a station, how you get away from the station. Whether it's lack of sidewalks, whether it's lack of, in some places, lack of parking. In other places, there's too much parking. In the other places, the bus service doesn't work very well. The variety, your inability to get to the station is a huge problem. Interacting with that is what we do to land use. In an expanding city, economics plays a role. And Sound Transit is not the only portion of that, and yet Sound Transit has levers we have not pulled very well. But in that process, we actually have to figure out how to work together. I represent the University of Washington. I don't represent the hierarchy of the University of Washington. If you want to see someone who is a real, forgive the term, pain in the ass to work with, the University of Washington is a huge pain in the ass to work with when it comes to Sound Transit. And we have brought many bad things to ourselves in this process. That process of getting to work together to realize you don't get everything is difficult, whether it's a big university, whether it's a landowner, whether it's a renter. And we have to find a better way to be nice to each other. Many giant new developments with absolutely dead retail that has pushed out the really wonderful retail that was there before. It's not good for anybody to do that. So how do we find a way to bring those South China back in and fill this new space while getting the new stuff, the good stuff that comes with that space? We're about to hear from Shoreline, who will have to deal with a lot of this redevelopment. How do you share benefits across everyone and not push people out? How can you keep the vibrancy that's there and yet improve the infrastructure that exists? That's the hard part. We've recognized what we've done poorly. We have some new ways to work together. Whether they're right or wrong, we need the people at this table to take that next step to figure out how we can, in fact, be nice to each other, not be the current administration.
Yeah, so I've thought for a while that Shoreline is kind of lucky in its geographic location, as are the other ST2 stations. because we have the benefit of the lessons that the agency learned in the first stations, which were blocking off land, fencing off land, not knowing what to do with remnant parcels. As the agency has gotten better at the basics of providing the transit, then they are allowed, to have the space to start thinking about TOD, and there's more policies about what to do with surplus land, and access now obviously is a big thing. I think the biggest opportunity, transportation patterns always dictate settlement patterns. That has always been true. And so this is just the new evolution of that pattern. And there's a lot of opportunities that land use must complement the transit. You don't get to keep a single family density when you have the amenity of a transit. Otherwise, you just create essentially a multi-million-dollar gated community where nobody can access it. So I think the land use and the approach that Shoreline has taken, I'm really proud of. I'm proud of our leaders. I'm proud of our neighbors. I'm proud of everybody that worked on this together, because it is the biggest opportunity for a local jurisdiction to reduce their carbon footprint. And you can talk all day about the benefits of density near transit in terms of getting cars off the road. If the buildings that redevelop aren't significantly greener than the ones they're replacing, you've missed a huge opportunity. And so in Shoreline, we mandated a green building level. If you're going to build anything in any of the new zoning around the light rails, it needs to be green building. And Built Green came out with their numbers for 2018, and Shoreline went from having 0 project registrations from 2010 to 2015 to 5 in 2016 to 7 in 2017 and 168 last year. That's projects. That represents 216 units. And so we have done the math about the carbon savings, the water savings, the money savings, and we're going to be bragging about that because it's a big deal. But we also said that anything near the station is required to, any rentals, we haven't gotten to ownership yet, but any rentals must include affordable housing, because this is the opportunity. The redevelopment that comes from this is something that doesn't happen often, and while it is difficult to get the utilities and the infrastructure and the connectivity together, but it does take advocates in the community. It does take people who are willing to show up at public meetings and argue for density and say we need the affordable housing included, and we need all of these other components and the access, because when you ask people what they want, they say connected, neighborhood gathering places, amenities, coffee shops, and that requires a level of redevelopment and density to support it. And so often people fight against the thing that brings them the amenities they want. And so community advocacy, being at the table early, even later in the game when the discussions are more complex and technical, still showing up and asking for what are really quality of life amenities in the community is very important.
Excellent. Well, thank you all panel members for being so respectful of the 3-minute time limit. It worked out really well, and it gives us all more time to react to comments or add to comments you've already made. So now we're going to kind of open things up, and I'd like people to try to keep their comments to 2 to 3 minutes at max. If there's something you heard tonight that you'd like to respond to, or something you forgot to say that you'd like to say, now would be the time to do it. And maybe the way to signal to me who's ready, you just put your card up. Jill, you're first.
Two things. One, something that Luis mentioned around ICE and enforcement on transit, and how it actually deters people from riding transit. We've had accounts of both elders and youth feeling unsafe, or like their heart racing when enforcement comes on board, or when they're too afraid to ask for help. Because the enforcement officers are not approachable. They literally look like SWAT police, and how unclear it is sometimes for somebody who isn't familiar with light rail to how to buy a ticket. Where do I go? And so a suggestion that community members have is why not? How about instead of fare enforcement, we have ushers or community liaisons or docents to help us find our way or buy a ticket. If you forgot your ticket, then it's okay. You can buy your ticket like they do on Amtrak or on the bus. So just a suggestion how to make the space more welcoming. because it is deterring folks from riding, and that's not what we want, right? We want folks to feel like they can. This is their train, that they can use this, and it's also that they are safe there. That no one from ICE or no one's gonna take their picture, or fine them $200 for not paying a $250 fine. And then the other thing that I wanted to add around green building, we want to ensure that, as we are building new buildings, how are we doing so without displacing the current tenants? I like to point to this space, Roberto Maestas Plaza, as an example of not displacing people to build a new development, right? Like, how do we do it in a way that takes care of the community? I get we need more units, but what happens to the community that was there before? Are they able to come back? Do they have the right to return? And are they able to also benefit? Are those tenants able to benefit from the green efficiency? A recommendation that we've been hearing about in other cities is how do we increase how do we actually weatherize and retrofit existing buildings? It's actually better for the environment to improve the existing structures instead of tearing down and building more. And so I wonder, how do we frame it, not just like scaling up, but how do we grow in a way that is with the pace of the community and with the planet as well, because we don't want to just keep growing for growing's sake, but how do we reduce our waste, reduce our pollution, and that doesn't mean bigger, but also how do we ensure that it benefits, again, the local community, the working class community, and allow people to come back to the city after they've been pushed out.
Great, thank you. Estela?
Thank you. I want to drive home the importance of prioritizing affordable housing with light rail. It shouldn't be just, oh yes, that there should be. It should be a priority. And the reason for that is that we wonder why our freeways are clogged up. They're clogged up because those who work in the service industry are people who need affordable housing, and those who work in our city should live in our city. And I think what's important also around affordable housing, that it absolutely needs to contain a mixed-use development to it, like here at Plaza Maestas, because the reality is that when you have the amenities that we have here at Plaza Maestas, the community is not going to stigmatize it and say, oh, it's those poor people over there. But they see themselves at the coffee shop. They see themselves with their children in the child care center. They see themselves in the summertime coming to watch an outdoor movie. And so that is extremely important in terms of people coming together and a gentrified neighborhood supporting affordable housing. And in doing that, the challenge that comes with it is that it is hard to raise money for the mixed-use amenities. And we are a very wealthy city. We have a lot of wealthy individuals who live here, and they need to be educated to give their money for the development of housing plus those amenities.
Thank you. Luis?
To iterate what I was saying earlier, a lot of people call me a community leader. I don't consider myself a community leader. I consider myself a human that have morals, and that if I see something wrong, I call it. The way I see it, the way I see my community, and the way I see the word community to me, I break it down in three: responsibility, accountability, and unity. So with those three is my job as my community. Just like my father built a community around us, I want to build a community around my kids and my community. And the responsibility is me to be a good person for my community. I want to hold people accountable, my community accountable, and I want them to hold me accountable. And then with all of that, we become united, so unity. So for me to see a light rail station, just like all the other stations, unfortunately, with full of cops, it doesn't represent unity. It doesn't represent safety for my kids, you know, for the kids, for the community. Like Jill was saying, is scary. So another thing that unfortunately I have a problem as a business owner with the light rail station is they are about they're about capitalism. We know capitalism. Unfortunately, we live in a capitalist country, so obviously it's about money. We all make money, but there's ways how to not be all about the money. Unfortunately, here corporations are always in the light rail station, all their billboards, their advertisement. When they first were telling us about the light rail station, they promised us small businesses that they were going to make it very easy for us, that our names were going to be all on the trains, that they were going to make it really easy for us to show the community from other communities that we had a business. If you ride the light rail station, you will not see any billboard from any small business. Why? Because we cannot afford that. You'll see Comcast, you'll see whatever big companies are. I don't want to give them a shout out, but they are, you know, they are out there, and we can't afford that. So how can you guys make it affordable for us companies? In Bikini Hall, I've seen literally like 5 small businesses they shut down in the past 10 years, if not more. So I don't want to see more of those businesses shutting down because we're not getting. One of my ideas that I had in the light rail station, that I feel that every light rail station should have a thing that I don't know what they're called in the where it shows that way is the station coffee shop, 1 mile that way is every business. It should be in every station. I don't see that, and all they are. I think with all the money that we're paying all those cops, we should be doing something better with all the money. I mean, we're paying, I don't know, thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to have those police in there. So let's make it more easy and fun for everybody.
Great, thank you. Who'd like to go next? Don.
I'll just say a word about station access. Both Estela and Mark raised that issue, and the station that I live closest to is the Mount Baker station, which is a model of how not to do bus rail integration. I'm about a mile from the station, so sometimes I walk the mile, sometimes I transfer to the bus, and it's not easy. So that's an area that we're trying to do a better job of planning for, and one of the things that the ST3 plan includes actually is really 2 elements. For new stations, there's a station access allowance that is included in the budget for each station, so it's going to let us be a little more intentional about that planning. And then there's also a regional system access fund that's going to give us some flexibility to partner with local jurisdictions and hopefully go back and do some retrofits to improve station access, be that bus, bike, ped, pickup, drop-off. So we're excited about that.
Great, thank you. Mark?
I can just yell. Okay. I'll just point out something that Sound Transit did. They actually allowed the university to teach a design class. We invented it as we went on mobility hubs, and we looked specifically at Mount Baker and Columbia City, which, by the way, have fascinating, my one data fact for the day. If you look at people at going to and using Mount Baker versus using Columbia City, just as many people transfer from the bus to rail as rail to bus at Mount Baker, which is really good transit. Well, it's a suicidal walk to get across Rainier, but the bus service is good. If you look at Columbia City, twice as many people go from bus to rail as go from rail to bus. And it all has to do with the connections to transit. So that, and we looked exactly what we were looking at. How could we improve the mobility associated with these 2 stations using whatever opportunities? And wayfinding is the magic engineering planning term you want for signs that point you where the heck you're going. And some places at Columbia City, there's some really good signs. At the rest of Columbia City and at Mount Baker, there's nothing. So those suggestions at least are being considered within Sound Transit. So continue to push for those, because supporting your local neighborhood, being able to point people in the directions of where shops are, where services are, where things are, those are really good opportunities. And as Shoreline builds out, the ability to help redesign so that in fact you can get there safely, which is Mount Baker's biggest problem, is it's really difficult to get around that particular station. So they're looking at that. We've done some things wrong. Hopefully we'll get around to doing some things better in the future.
Great. Miranda?
Since the mic's right here.
Yep.
So I want to reiterate the importance of the multimodal access. That's what makes the healthy community, the walkable community, the interconnected community. But I want to talk a little bit about the timeline as well. And I think this is one of the major disconnects. I feel like I spent 4 years doing light rail planning and learned a lot of lessons about human nature, a lot of lessons about the limitations of governmental communication, a lot of lessons about, I'll just say, human nature's reluctance to change. I think it's oversimplified to say people are bad at change. I think humans are very good at being one state and then later being in another state. It helps if you have faith that the state that you're going to is going to be better. If you're not convinced of that, then it's way harder to take the leap. But even if you do, birth, death, construction, transitions are hard. They're bloody awful messes sometimes. So we're also dealing with timeframes that are so far out of a household's how they operate. We started doing station planning 10 years before the stations were supposed to be operational, and we had folks saying, why are you doing this soon? And it's because it needs to end in capital projects to fix roads and sidewalks and build bike lanes so folks can get to the station. And 10 years when you have to end with a capital project is not even close to enough time. The budgets we're talking about are way outside of household budgets. The federal government isn't exactly handing out money to do transportation projects anymore. So it really takes a long time. It took us 4 years to do the zoning because it was so controversial. And now we've got 5 years till the station opens, and we're doing a lot of transportation planning and multimodal planning and figuring out how to upgrade utilities and how to manage that line between flexible and predictable in terms of development, and how to get the right use mix, how to prevent displacement, how to keep all these moving pieces moving, and especially when there's a lot of interjurisdictional coordination and interagency coordination and communicating. Artists and engineers speak almost a completely different language, and I felt like I was a translator in a lot of, especially the early days when you're dealing with a lot of engineers and a lot of community organizers, and whichever group had made the agenda, the other one was really angry that they didn't feel like their needs were being met out of the meeting. So point is, keep talking, have patience, and there's just a huge opportunity that I'm so glad our region is finally capitalizing on, and I look forward to it.
We're going to hear from Greg next, and one of the things I want to remind the audience of, if you have questions, you have a 3x5 card, please fill them out, hold them in the air, and a staff member will come by to pick them up. Great. Greg?
I've heard some things from fellow panelists that are pretty exciting. Jill, the idea of switching from enforcement to, hey, welcome. Yeah, this is your train, and please feel comfortable. Do you have any questions? I think that welcoming kind of attitude is something that certainly TSA would benefit from at the airport, and I think Sound Transit on the way in from the airport as well. I'm, as I said, very excited as each new station opens, because when I began work on this, I was a young man, and from the time that I sort of started as an elected official on this issue to the first station's opening was 22 years. I don't know if I'd known it was going to be 22 years, would I have had the courage to continue on. But the day that the first 12 stations opened, it felt like it was worth it. It felt like all of the disagreements, policy-wise and personality-wise, and a couple of failed elections and a couple of crises of the moment when Sound Transit almost imploded, all washed away. And I think as you watch Sound Transit 2, which will get us north to Linwood, across Lake Washington, and out to Overlake, I think it's called Overlake, thank you, and then south to the border of Federal Way, you're going to see a significant change in how people move around the region. And for the climate, that's important. It's also important, though, because we then can connect more people to jobs and opportunity, whether it's educational opportunity or economic opportunity, they'll have that access. And so I'm very encouraged with the conversation today. Some of the suggestions have been terrific. I know that Sound Transit is listening, and I look forward to some of the questions that you all have.
Great. Thank you very much, panel members. So now we're going to slide into the third part of the evening, and that is audience questions. And I've got a couple here already. Some of them will apply to certain people, and I hope no one feels picked on, Don, but that's right. I do hope the rest of the panel members will chime in with any ideas or thoughts. So the first question is, does Sound Transit plan to build any stations that are integrated into larger buildings? Why are all our current stations, aside from downtown and the tunnels, freestanding?
I think that's for you.
Thank you, Mayor. We are actively looking at that with the ST3 project that's going to build a second transit tunnel through downtown Seattle. You know, that's an environment where the land prices are really going to make looking at those solutions economical. Are there going to be opportunities on other stations as well? There might be. You know, in terms of why didn't that happen with any of the Sound Move stations that are either in service or in construction now. It was really just, you know, a reflection of where the agency was at in its development process. And two simple examples. Capitol Hill, we built the station, and then there was a vacant lot surrounding the station for a number of years. It's now finally under development as TOD. The Roosevelt neighborhood, we are actually trying to deliver the TOD simultaneously with the light rail construction. Still no direct overbuild, but another step. And so this question is about, you know, are you going to take that third step and actually have overbuilding and entrances integrated into development? And we do.
Great, thank you. Second question is, and Miranda and Don might like to address this, what is the first lesson from Link so far that will inform community engagement for 130th and Graham Street?
Again, government communication is very limited. We tend to speak in wonky technical terms, and that is not how people think, and that is not how people talk to their neighborhood. And we are operating at a dearth of trust just being government. So when we were starting our communications process, we had a series of visioning workshops, and we had one that was conducted entirely in Korean using translator sets. We had one where we worked with the Senior Center and FutureWise for folks of modest means. So we really went out and tried to engage communities, because it's very easy for folks to understand what you're talking about at a conceptual level. Everybody has an opinion. When you're at the early stages of a process, they can follow along. It's later in the process, which is when people tend to start paying attention because they've heard there's a threat, and that threat tends to get butts in seats at meetings. But unfortunately, by that time in the process, usually you're talking about development code regulations, you're talking about technical language. It's really hard to back up. You're not having a community conversation. You're having staff presenting to a decision-making body, and there's a podium for public comment, and everybody has 3 minutes with no response. So I think that as you're moving into this process, take advantage of the fact that when you're early in the process, you're talking about general things that everybody can weigh in on, and then go out into the community, seek those opportunities, offer childcare, have some food. You know, there's just simple things that make it easier for people to show up in their neighborhood, go to where they are, and, you know, I mean, it's tough because you have to balance, you know, the how easy it is to have a website and an FAQ and announce meetings over email with how important it is to have those personal conversations. For me, I know the way that I move the needle and help people really understand kind of what was going on was just in all these one-on-one conversations, all these small groups going. I went to 60 night meetings in 2014. So you have to do the work, you have to get in the community, and you have to figure out how to communicate really complex processes in language that people actually use.
I want to shortstop this, although Don's the guy who really needs to weigh in on some of these things. One of the things we have to understand, it's hard for you to understand, and sometimes it's hard for us to understand, is decisions are made institutionally. You have, at an agency like Sound Transit or WashDOT or the city, you have an engineer who's been given a budget and said, you have to deliver it by this budget. You're not allowed to overspend it. And so they're desperately trying to deliver a project that functions technically within this budget. You have another group showing up and say, well, look at all the money you have. You should be buying me this and this and this and this, whether it's sidewalks, whether it's bike lanes, whether it's whatever, a new building, whether it's affordable housing. You have a group that shows up and says, I'm affordable housing, and it's really valid. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, we should do this. You know, solve my problem for us. So we have a bunch of people who come in and say, solve my problem. And at one level, there's nothing wrong with that. What I would like you to go out there and be evangelical about is when you show up to those meetings, when your friends show up to the meetings, say, how can we do this? Rather than saying, I want this to be an outcome. How can we solve this problem? So we don't want to displace people. Coming in and saying, don't displace people, you're not allowed to build. That's a non-starter, I guarantee you that. So come in instead and say, how can we not? What ways? Could we try A? Could we try B? Could we try C? Could we try D? To not displace these people. And that way, when you're coming in questioning and asking and exploring, you might find yourself with much better outcomes than coming in and demanding. And so that questioning approach, and often, this is Mark handing in reports, I never give anybody an official report until I've given it to them unofficially. Talk to me about this. Yeah, you didn't see this, you know. Give me some feedback now before it's too late to get that feedback. Having informal conversations, sitting down over coffee, talk to me about these things. Join these people at the table and say, what's this? How about this? So that they can say, you know, this is a really stupid idea for this and this and this. And then I can say, oh, yeah, that's right. Help me. What can I propose? And then I can figure out how to talk to Don in planner speak. Right? So think in terms of the questions and ways you might get around, as well as how you can do a lot of this stuff informally so that you're not standing up in meetings where people yell at you for 3 hours, 3 minutes at a time.
I'll be just really honest that community was present during the planning, like going up and talking about what we wanted to see for Graham Street. Like original plan was to go through the community, the Filipino Community Center, and the community was like, no, this is our community, right? And so the plan was changed, but ended up like they were thinking about above ground or, you know, instead of under and all. But instead, you know, they just took us all out of the plan altogether. And I don't know if it was because of cost savings or they just didn't care to build right there, but people were really disappointed, you know, like after putting in all that effort and planning and visioning and giving suggestions, they weren't listened to. So I wonder how can Sound Transit actually listen to the community and take into their concerns and then translate it into plans. I think that is your job, and to really listen to the concerns of the community, and not make us feel the impact, right? Not make us pay for it. Not make us be the ones who are having to clean up the mess afterwards.
Greg, anything you want to add, or Estela? Don?
Well, first, I just congratulate Jill for your success in getting the Graham Street station included in the ST3 plan, and I think Miranda's absolutely right. Going out into the community is the best way to work with people as opposed to asking folks to come to us. You know, the other thing, I know it doesn't work perfectly, but that I like about the Sound Transit governance structure is the federated board. And it's been a subject of debate, and I guess I'm lapsing into wonk speak there, but our board of directors is made up of local elected officials. And what that has meant is that our leadership is really demanding of us not only deliver the transit infrastructure, but contribute to community development. I can distinctly remember Mayor Nichols saying, we want to leave communities better than we found them. And when I was lower on the totem pole, one of those project managers that Mark was referring to with a budget to manage to, it always made me very uncomfortable. But I think in the end, it has been good for both the transit agency to have that level of accountability and, you know, frankly, for local elected officials to be able to talk to each other about what is reasonable to include in the transit project and what's going to have to be funded somewhere else.
We're going to, several of the questions here are pretty directed at Don, so I'm going to kind of mix things up a little bit and ask a general question. Are Uber and Lyft friends or foes of transit? Hey, oh, Mark is dying to speak here.
The simple answer is both. Or Mark's most famous answer is it depends. But if anybody's, there are a couple of my ex-students in here. The answer depends. So if the transit system works really well, then they are not really going to compete against you. Where the transit system doesn't work, in New York, Manhattan is a great example. It's not that there isn't a transit system. It's a great transit system. It's just so incredibly overloaded that people don't deal with it. It doesn't have a good reputation. It doesn't have a good environment, and so they take alternatives. So you're going to see that. There are opportunities. There's a test, by the way, that starts April 16th at Mount Baker, Columbia City, Othello, and Tukwila, where they are going to be subsidizing the use of VIA as a way to get to some of these stations, to avoid building more park and ride space so you can use the land for affordable housing. So that if the bus service sucks, like around Columbia City, you have a way home without having to walk for 25 minutes. So will that work or not? We have to find out whether those things are good, bad, or indifferent. So Uber and Lyft have the potential in many places to be advantageous. On the other hand, if you don't do the other supportive things that help people get to and from Link so that you can use it, then without better alternatives, people will in fact use them, and that will have detrimental effects. So it's how you engage with Uber and Lyft will define whether they're actually beneficial or negative to you.
Great. Anyone else want to respond to Uber and Lyft question? Well, I'm going to ask a follow-up question to Uber and Lyft, and that is, are free shuttles a possibility to light rail?
Gonna just keep talking. Sorry about that.
Well, we're going to ask you to pass a microphone to someone else just for a minute, and you can get it back. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I think that's worth considering. I started something in West Seattle called the West Seattle Water Taxi. And the West Seattle Water Taxi runs all day, every day in the summer, and at the peaks in the winter. And there's a shuttle that meets it. There's a shuttle that goes to the West Seattle Junction, and there's another one that comes up to the Admiral neighborhood in Alki. And it's free. And it makes it a very nice connection to use that instead of driving across the West Seattle Bridge. I suppose some people probably choose to take it rather than a Metro bus. I don't know. But it really makes it work. Laurelhurst, I think, is an example. There was a bus line in Laurelhurst that was running a lot, and mostly empty. And they turned it into not a free shuttle, but a shuttle to connect that community with the University of Washington Stadium station. And now it's full. People use it. And so I think how we connect the light rail investment, which is a huge, huge investment and a very worthwhile one, but how do we really extend its effectiveness? And I think shuttles, whether they're subsidized, well, they're all subsidized, but whether they're completely subsidized or reduced fare, or we should figure out what works and try it.
Yep.
Try it.
Anybody else want to chime in? Okay, Mark.
I was going to say,
Luis.
back in the days, I don't know, even 5-10 years ago, maybe less than that, they used to do downtown from International District to downtown, and it used to be free. So why can't we do that also, somehow for the train? Sometimes you get off from like here to sometimes one stop, some of us all we need, and you're in a rush, you can, I think that it is definitely possible. I don't think that it will affect them at all. So, yes.
The goal of the study that I talked to you about is, in fact, to find out what's the best combination of cost and service. What you really want is whether it's a free is good or bad is kind of the wrong question, because nothing is free. You're paying for it, right? You're going to pay for it one way or another. So what you really need to do is find out for every community, which will be different, what's the right mix of bus service, what's the right mix of local shuttle of some kind, shape, or form, what's the right mix of dockless bike, what's the right mix of electric scooter, what's the right mix of just good bike parking and sidewalks. And every station is going to be different. So free tends to be bad because you remove all economic behavior from the world. You want people to think about what I'm doing. You don't want people who should walk a quarter mile on a good sidewalk. You don't want them to take a free shuttle. You want them to walk the quarter mile. On the other hand, if you're coming, you need help to get there, then we need to give you help to get there, right? So that there's no single answer. It really is neighborhood dependent, and you want to think about it as you work through the neighborhood. How are we going to get people here?
Anyone else want to comment? I'm going to go on and put Don on the center stage again here, and the question is please elaborate on access allowance. And I'd like to add to that question, could free shuttle service be included as part of this access allowance?
So the access allowance is a capital budget, so it couldn't be applied to an ongoing expense like a shuttle bus. So just to elaborate a little bit more, during the ST3 planning process, each of the new ST3 stations, be they BRT, Sounder Commuter Rail, or Link Light Rail, were classified into a different typology based upon their land use and the type of transit service in that area. And then a dollar amount was assigned that ranges, at the low end from a few $100,000 to the high end of a few $1 million. And so as we go into the planning of these projects, we will be doing analysis of, what are going to be the gaps in access to those stations in terms of missing sidewalks, missing bike paths, what have you. And, what we really hope is that we can leverage those funds by partnering with other agencies to do more than what is strictly budgeted in ST.
Great. Next question, is Sound Transit currently using equity tools to help assess the impact of policy decisions?
So in the planning for the West Seattle and Ballard Link Light Rail extensions, what we are doing is we're borrowing the race and equity toolkit that the City of Seattle has developed. And so we have been applying that to guide our community engagement and some of the decision making around the early planning on that project. And we're also in the process of really, I would say, doing our own internal homework, of having staff go through undoing institutional racism training and working towards developing a more robust equity framework of our own that we can use.
Okay. Does anyone else want to comment?
Yes, I have a question about how you're using the racial equity toolkit. As the toolkit is only as good as it's evaluated, is there, I guess, a accountability group that is checking in on how well Sound Transit is going to use the toolkit? Because we've also seen the racial equity toolkit misused as well.
You know, there's a couple levels of accountability. The first being the stakeholder advisory group that I referenced. So we've assembled a panel of about, Mayor Nichols is on the panel. What are there? About 30 folks on the panel throughout the corridor that are intended, you know, to bring the community's voice into the planning process. And so they're receiving the analysis from the application of that toolkit and using it to inform their recommendations. And that information is also being shared with our elected leadership group and with our board of directors.
Okay, next question is, and I think several panel members may be able to comment on this. The downtown tunnel will change hands from Metro to Sound Transit on the 23rd. How can Sound Transit improve the passenger experience in the downtown tunnel?
So, can I ask who asked that question? What's your perception of the customer experience in the tunnel? Well, it could be better, sure. But were there specific things that were... So I think Metro has been a good steward of the tunnel. It's held up remarkably well. It's now 30 years old, or nearly 30 years old. So my experience generally has been pretty good. I think there would be opportunities to change that if Sound Transit heard that there were particular things. I certainly think that you know, fare system could be smoother. It's sometimes hard to find a place to tap on and tap off, so I think that's a conversation that Sound Transit would probably welcome as they take over management of it, and as it moves from bus and rail to rail, it's going to feel a little different. It's going to be smoother in terms of a broken down bus won't stop the trains anymore. So I think that the timeliness will be improved. I don't know, how well the experience will go for the buses that now will be on the service. That's probably one that Metro's going to be struggling with and learning about as they make that.
I'm going to ask another general question here, hopefully everybody can address. What's your perspective on attempts to turn the Sound Transit Board into an elected body?
Let me speak to that one. So I've got a couple of competing feelings about that. I was one of 3 county council members who led the effort to merge King County and Metro. King County had a directly elected government, and Metro had a 40-some member federated government and taxing powers. And I thought that Metro has 5 powers beyond the wastewater treatment and transit that they could elect to get into. And I thought that with that kind of very sweeping power, it was appropriate to have a directly elected body. And I thought it was important as we were dealing with growth management that transportation, specifically transit and land use, were in the same place. Sound transit is much more focused on a relatively small number of services for a 3-county region. And so I'm comfortable with the federated board. It is the only place that we as a metropolitan region sit down at a table and make real decisions. And I think we've learned a lot from that, and I think we've benefited in ways beyond sound transit as a result of that. People talking to one another, getting to know one another across county lines. So I like it the way it is. I also, our former transportation director here in Seattle, Grace Kruniken, is now the general manager of BART. So I've kind of followed BART, which has a directly elected board. And it doesn't always work as smoothly as you would like. I suppose government shouldn't be as perfectly smooth. But I think that the federated system with local elected officials who are accountable to local people, I think it works well. I think we've learned a lot, and I think that we've built an incredibly effective agency as a result.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to comment? Mark?
I can always comment on anything, whether it has any sense or not. I lived in Washington, D.C. The advantage of a board that's one step removed from a direct election means that they have the freedom sometimes to do things that are right but unpopular. In something that is truly elected, you can have very dramatic changes in direction, which are difficult on how an agency would actually operate and undertake it. So, on the other hand, if you are not responsive to what the public is after, then that's bad too. So finding a middle ground in there where you understand what the public wants and are responsive to it, but don't jump from one outcome to another based on a single election concerns me. I've seen too many politically motivated groups cause bad things to happen on an outcome because of a particular opinion. On the other hand, you have to listen to people and you have to be aware. So in a way, I kind of like the federated version of an operating agency as it tries to thread that needle. I don't guarantee that that's right. Remember, I'm a technical guy, so I kind of lean on the technical side.
And just quickly, I haven't thought about this before, but my first impression is the problem with elections are campaigns. The problem with campaigns are finance. So the amount of time that it would take for an elected body to campaign to raise money takes away from the time that they should be working to solve the problem. I think most of the Sound Transit Board are elected officials, just elected locally. So they're still beholden to the people to some degree.
We're going to switch back, I think, to a quick question to Don, and then we're going to have a general question for everybody. Don, can you tell us what the next steps are for the many small fenced-off lots in Beacon Hill and Rainier Valley owned by Sound Transit? And how long will we wait?
Well, there are a number of next steps that are in progress, actually. Just across the street here, we own a small parcel that by itself doesn't have much development value, but next to it is a larger parcel, and a developer made a proposal to us to purchase our remnant piece and incorporate it into their development. And so that is a transaction that's moving forward. So, you know, hopefully in the next few years we won't have any more empty fields across the street from Estela's wonderful development here. You know, some of the parcels down along MLK are tougher. Frankly, at the time that was being planned and designed, there was a lot of pressure to minimize property takes, and sometimes that you know, left us with parcels that are difficult to reuse. We are, though, Brooke Bellman, if you could stand up for a moment. Brooke is my deputy executive director for land use planning, and she's in charge of all of our transit-oriented development efforts. And works very closely with the Seattle Office of Housing and other affordable housing developers, and Brooke and her team are really working closely with the city to look at what other parcels can we unlock for housing opportunities.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to have one last question. This is going to be a kind of a lightning round because we need to wrap it up. And I'd just like to thank the audience for what great questions. It's been hard to pick and choose what to ask. Maybe if, Estela, if you'd like to start this lightning round. And the question is what one thing would you like to change if you could?
Around transportation.
Around transportation, yes.
Well, I'm going to broaden the question a little bit. And what I would like to see more of, obviously, is affordable housing around transit stations with communities of color organizations being given the opportunity to develop that housing along with mixed use and developing their capacity to do that kind of work, because there are a handful of communities of color organizations that are doing development. And I just know what it did for El Centro de la Raza in terms of stabilizing us as an organization, and where I don't have to worry every 15 days, how am I going to make payroll, because it has changed the dynamic so much in that way. And I would love for other communities of color to have that opportunity.
Thank you.
There are a long list of things I'd be interested in changing, but as far as Sound Transit goes, people will tell you that we had an opportunity in 1968 and 1970 to pass forward thrusts transit, and that was heavy transit, would have been much like BART or the Washington, D.C. metro system. So that would have been nice, though my life would have been much less interesting if that had happened. So I want to just say that I would like us all to recognize that as a region, we, and as voters and as community activists, we've done something remarkable here. We've started on a path that will change our children and grandchildren and their children's lives. It'll be a more environmentally responsible region. It'll be, I hope, a more just region, and getting from place to place will not be the first thing that you sit down and complain about when you run into your coworkers or your friends or neighbors. So I would like to see us recognize we're doing something really important,
right.
And we should feel good vibes as a result.
Thank you.
I've always enjoyed taking public transit. I actually haven't, like when I grew up here in Seattle, I didn't get my driver's license until in my 30s. And so I want to make sure that especially the communities who are transit dependent, folks with, again, different disabilities, folks who are lower income, working folks, people who can't afford a car, youth, can utilize this service, that this service is for them, and to ensure that it is accessible and affordable and safe for them. And the communities, especially communities of color, can continue to thrive in their historical neighborhoods, to continue to have cultural anchors like El Centro, like the station, like Rainier Beach Action Coalition, continue to come back to the South End and return home. I think that's something that people really want to do, is to utilize this service and to live in Seattle with their community.
Thank you. We've got about 2 minutes left. If we could really do a lightning round, the last 3, that would be great.
For me, things that I would like to see more is create more jobs for our people. I'm not against the. First of all, I don't want to. I want to make sure that I'm making a point that I'm not against the police. I know they also have to feed their families. I know they have that's their job. But I think that we can create better jobs than just police. I think that we can create some type of jobs, like you said. I think that more POC, which is people of color, need more jobs, and so we can afford to live in our neighborhoods.
I'm going to say two things, forgive me. So the first is we have to operate the systems we build better than we often do. We tend to build things and run away from them, and until they break, then that's okay. Then I'm going to pick up on Luis's talk. When I was on the expert review panel for ST3, one of the huge questions is who is actually going to build these things, this being Sound Transit 3, but also all the DOT construction work, and then who's going to operate it, because an awful lot requires people. So to ST3, to Sound Transit, here is a group of people we want to teach in order to become the next generation of people who build it and operate it. There's a huge opportunity here, and we need to make that happen, because those jobs will have to stay here, and we need to make that happen, whether it's community college or wherever, UW, don't care.
I would like to remove as much gasoline from the equation as possible, get rid of the fossil-based, auto-dependent culture. I think the best way to do that is through land use nexus, is through density, walkability, sidewalks, bike lanes, transit, biofuels, electric. I think that at the end of the day, the more that we can create these walkable communities, the better we increase our quality of life and leave a better planet for the next generation.
Great.
Wow.
Thank you.
You did it.
Yeah, really. That's really excellent closing. I have a couple of things I just want to remind everybody about, and that is that you can shape the future of light rail. Sound Transit is currently accepting comments, scoping for its environmental work. You can visit their website, check out the virtual simulations, and provide comments by March 18th. Now, that's Monday, I believe.
Yes.
So you're going to be...
It's been extended
Oh.
to April 2nd.
Oh, right. Good news. Breaking news, April 2nd. And also, don't forget to provide your own Transit Talk ideas on the sheet that was given to you when you came in earlier, and put them in the fishbowl as you're leaving. I would like to thank the panelists for your insights, and I'd like to thank the audience for your great questions. There were so many good questions we couldn't get in tonight. Thank you to Centro de la Raza for this space. Today's recording will be available shortly on TCC's website, as well as the Seattle Channel's website. If you'd like to revisit this conversation or tell other people about it. Again, it was such a rich conversation tonight. I think we could go on for hours and hours. Thank you to everybody who came tonight. Thank you to TCC, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Good night.